Hello students, welcome back. Myself Pushpendra Singh and we are going to start with our current affairs. All right, so we have these classes on the YouTube, so you can subscribe our channel on the YouTube where you will get the daily current affairs related classes. All right, and you can subscribe our channel on the YouTube also where you will get the daily current affairs, and these lectures are basically useful for those students who are preparing for the civil services examination as well as other government competitive examinations, because for that purpose you require to read the national newspapers like the Hindu or Indian Express, right? And apart from that, you can also supplement your preparation with the help of these lectures. All right, so let's begin with the lecture, which is basically the current affairs related. And please subscribe our channel on the YouTube for the daily current affairs. All right, so let's begin with the lecture. Okay, so first news is related to the Sputnik 5. As you know, the Sputnik 5 is basically, a Russian vaccine. The Russia has made this vaccine for its purpose. Okay. Now, what is happening is that due to the shortage of those vaccines in India, right? Shortage of especially the COVID-19 vaccines in India, as well as the limitations of the manufacturing capacities, right? With respect to the Serum Institute of India as well as the Bharat Biotech, the government of India has allowed the Sputnik 5 vaccine for its emergency use, right? So the government of India has authorized the emergency use of the Russian made vaccine, which is the Sputnik 5, which is basically followed after a meeting with the subject expert committee, which have recommended the uses of the Sputnik 5 vaccine in India. Okay, now if approved by the Drug Controller General of India, the Sputnik 5 would be the third vaccine that would be used in India. Okay, so that would be available after the Covishield, which is basically manufactured by the Serum Institute of India, as well as the Covaxin, which is built by the Bharat Biotech. Okay, so that will be the third vaccine that will be available in India. Now, what is this Drug Controller General of India? The Drug Controller General of India is basically a head of Department of Central Drug Standard Control Organization, which is basically an organization of Government of India, right, which is responsible for approval of the license of the specified category of drugs, right? For example, you have the blood or blood products, you have IV fluids, you have vaccines, or you have the sera in India. So the Drug Controller General of India is basically responsible for the approval of license of those type of the categories of drugs. All right. So the Sputnik 5 is developed by the Russia's Gamaleya Research Institute of Epidemiology and Microbiology, right, which have basically developed this vaccine. Now, this institute claims that this vaccine has the efficacy of over 90%, right? So the institute basically claimed that it has very high efficacy of 90%. Okay, now this vaccine supplies for the global market with the help of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, international partners in India. Okay, and that will be provided and that will be built or manufactured with the help of these international partners in India, as well as in Brazil, China, South Korea, as well as in other countries. Now let's understand what is this Russian Direct Investment Fund. Okay, these Russian Direct Investment Fund, first of all, is a Russia's sovereign wealth fund, right? It has, the reserve capital of around 10 billion US dollars, right, under the management. Now, this Russian Direct Investment Fund is created in the year of 2011, right? It has created under the leadership of the president as well as the Prime Minister of Russia. The main purpose of the Russian Direct Investment Fund is to co-invest alongside with top global investors, right? The main purpose of this fund is to act as a catalyst for the direct investment in Russia. Okay, so this RDIF, which is also called the Russian Direct Investment Fund, have invested and committed for this purpose over 2 trillion rubles, which is the currency of Russia, right? And over which RDIF alone invested around 2 billion rubles, right? And the RDIF also attracted over $40 billion, of the money of the foreign capital into the Russian economy through the long-term strategic partnership. Now, through this long-term strategic partnership with the help of these international partners in Russia, in India, Brazil, China, South Korea, and other countries, these vaccines will be supplied as well as produced. Okay. So they're talking about the Sputnik 5, which is the third COVID-19 vaccine, would be approved for the emergency use in India. Okay. It is similar to, the Covishield vaccine, which is also available in India, right? Which is also the AstraZeneca, right? In terms of its design. The Sputnik 5 is granted for the emergency use, for the emergency approval. Okay. And it has been used specifically without any proper controlled trials. But the results of such trials, which was published later, right, in the Lancet Journal, has said that it has the high efficacy of 91.6%. But initially, it was approved for the emergency approval, right, for the emergency use without even proper controlled trials. And before India, the vaccine was already approved, right, under emergency authorization in 59 countries, right? And there is one more thing, is that there is no definite studies which establish this efficacy of this vaccine against the new variants, because nowadays the mutated virus or mutated variants of the virus have been coming out now, which is affecting, right, the population, which is also most contagious. Now we have no such the detailed study about the efficacy of this vaccine of the new variants of the COVID-19. Okay, this Sputnik 5 vaccine can be stored, right? It is basically ready to use in the solution of water frozen to minus 18 degrees Celsius, or it has the freeze dried powder, which is stored at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius, which can be used directly for the ready to use. Okay, next you have Ahar Kranti. See, Ahar Kranti is nothing but it is basically, a mission which is also known as, the nutritionally balanced diet. So it is basically, a basically mission for spreading the awareness related to the balanced diet. Okay, so the Union Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan has launched this new mission called Ahar Kranti. This Ahar Kranti is basically, the main purpose of Ahar Kranti is to spread the message of the need for the nutritionally balanced diet, because most of the population in India have taken the nutritionally imbalanced diet, right? And we need to understand the importance of, right, the balanced diet, and for that purpose, right, the importance of accessible to all local fruits and vegetables for the purpose of this balanced diet is also most important. Okay, so Vijna Bharti, which is also known as VIVA, which is a non-governmental organization, as well as the Global Indian Scientists and Technocrats Forum, which is also known as GIST, have come together to launch this mission. The main purpose of this mission is basically the good diet, good cognition. So it is a recognition of the balanced diet for the purpose of good cognition. Okay, so let's understand what is this Vijna Bharti or VIVA. Okay, I'm just giving you a brief introduction about the Vijna Bharti or VIVA. So first of all, let's understand the background. So as you know that India faces very critical challenges, right, as the nation in its, towards becoming a welfare state, right? So we have a lot of challenges towards becoming a welfare state. Okay, and we have rapid strides specifically in the field of science and technology. Okay, and we have a lot of challenges in terms of the meeting of those challenges. Now, in this context, the Vijna Bharti, right, which is nothing but a science movement, which is nothing but, a science movement with a Swadeshi spirit. You are getting my point. So Vijna Bharti or VIVA is a science movement with a Swadeshi spirit, right? So this Swadeshi science movement, which is known as the Vijna Bharti or VIVA, has started in Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, right? It has started by a few eminent scientists, right, under the overall guidance of the Professor K.I. Vasu. Okay, now this movement, which is known as the Vijna Bharti or VIVA, have gradually gained its momentum. Now, this movement have now emerged as an organization with a national presence. Okay, and in 1991, if you see, as well as recently in 2020-21, especially in the month of October, right, specifically in the Nagpur meet, it was decided to launch this Swadeshi science movement at all India level. So they have expanded the scope of this movement, and they named it as a Vijna Bharati, right? If you see the foundation principles regarding this Viva, so foundation principles are very much, right, a vibrant movement for the development of Swadeshi sciences, right? As you know that, a dynamic science movement with a Swadeshi spirit. What does that mean? A dynamic science movement with a Swadeshi spirit. So what does that mean? It simply mean that you are trying to interlink the traditional and the modern sciences on one hand, right, as well as the natural and the spiritual sciences on the other hand. I'm repeating again, it is a science movement with a Swadeshi spirit. That means you are trying to interlink the traditional and modern sciences on one side and the natural and the spiritual sciences on the other side. All right. Now, this Vijna Bharati has units in across 22 states of our country, right? Which is also, in a pan-India level. Okay. So this, this Vijna Bharati, as well as, you have basically one more organization called the Global Indian Scientist Technocrat Forum. So what is this Global Indian Scientist, and Technocrat Forum? It is nothing but an autonomous platform, which is itself is created by the Vijna Bharati. Okay, the main purpose of creation of this GIST is to link the global Indians, right, with the underprivileged masses in the country. For example, you have underprivileged masses of around 40 crore, okay, which are mostly residing in the 3 lakhs villages of our country. Now, the GIST was officially launched, first of all, by a great scientist, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, on 26 December 2010 at Pune. Okay, and the former chairman of Department of Atomic Energy, whose name is Dr. Anil Kakodar, is basically a guiding spirit behind this novel vision. Okay, as you know that India has made the strong or rapid strides for the economic progress, right? The need for the economic development, the need for the inclusive development, covering the large fraction of our weaker sections of the population, right? Which is far more critical, far more important. Okay, so this Ahar Kranti movement is designed to address the problem of hunger as well as the disease which is in abundance. Okay, so the Union Ministry of the Science and Technologies, that is the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, Pravasi Bharati Academic and Scientific Sampark, that is called Prabhas, is collaborating, right, with various central and the state governments as well as the agencies which are involved for the implementation of such mission. Okay, so let's understand what is this Prabhas. What is this Prabhas? So Prabhas is nothing but a Pravasi Bharati Academic and Scientific Sampark. What is that? It is a platform again which integrate the Indian diaspora with the motherland, that is India. Okay, so it is a portal which is having the interactive digital platform. You're getting my point. So it's a portal which is having the interactive digital platform which is accessible to India as well as the diaspora science and technology experts, right? The main purpose is to networking, to collaborating, to browsing, right, some sort of way through scientific profiles, and definitely helping in terms of achievement of this inclusive growth. Okay, this program will focus mainly on the training of teachers, right, who will pass this knowledge, because ultimate aim of mission is to spread this awareness. So obviously there will be a training to the teachers and that will pass this message to the students, right? And that will ultimately be passed to the families and finally to the societies at large. Okay, now we have adopted such strategy also before also. For example, for the eradication of the polio, we have adopted this strategy, right? And which we have gained a grand success for this purpose. Okay, and as you know that according to one estimate, the India produced as much as 2 times the amount of calories which it consumed, but still we have imbalance in our diet despite of having enough production, enough calories. Okay, and many in our country, that it is malnourished, right? The root cause of this malnutrition is not about the absence of this calorie or absence of the food, but it is about the lack of nutritional awareness that we have, right, in all sections of our society. Okay, next, the refugees and illegal migrants. As you know that in India we have lot of illegal migrants, right, specifically from the Rohingya people from Myanmar. We have illegal migrants also from the Bangladesh, right? Now what is happening is that, right, a petition was filed basically in the Supreme Court regarding some direction for the welfare of the Rohingya people in India, right? And the Supreme Court asked the central government to, to clear the stand, and the center have appeared, right, to the Supreme Court, have given a version of the detail, information about according to the Rohingya people, or related to the Rohingya people. The central government says that they are illegal migrants in India, and they are mostly in the detention camps which are set up in Jammu as well as in other parts of Delhi. So the Supreme Court have also accepted the center's contention that they will be deported. They will be deported, but they are currently in the detention camps which are in Jammu as well as in other parts of Delhi. So they will be deported under Foreigners Act 1946. Okay. Now, under 1951 UN Convention on the Status of the Refugees, as well as subsequent 1967 protocol, okay, that defined the word refugee, right? So refugee can be a person, right, who is outside their country of origin. For example, if those people are found in India, they are outside of their country of origin, right? And they are unwilling to return, right? Why they are unwilling to return? Because they face a lot of fear related to the persecutions or related to elimination, getting killed, right? They have, some sort of the killings related to the, race, religion, nationality, right? So they have a lot of problems, and they are unwilling to return to their, to their basically the home state or to the home country. So that is basically, or those sections of the population is called the refugees. Now you must understand that the stateless people, right, which generally do not have the origin, or does not recognize which state they belong, right? They are also considered as a refugees in the sense, because their country of origin, where the citizenship where they have is understood, right, the country of former habitual residence, where the formerly they have resided for that purpose. Okay, now let's understand who are these Rohingyas. So Rohingya people are basically also considered as a stateless Indo-Aryan ethnic group. I would repeat again, the Rohingya people are considered as a stateless Indo-Aryan ethnic group, right? And these Rohingya people predominantly, follow Islam, and they used to reside in the Rakhine state of Myanmar, which is also known as Burma. Okay, now there was crisis in 2017 in Myanmar or in Burma. After crisis, around 7,40,000 people, specifically Rohingyas, fled the Bangladesh. Okay, fled the Myanmar, and they have basically, crossed the border and reached to the Bangladesh. Now, an estimated around 1.4 million Rohingya lives in Myanmar. Okay, that is a one estimate that provide this estimate. Okay, fine. So you can see here the plight of the Rohingya, which are basically migrating from Myanmar to the Bangladesh and also to the India also. Okay, next, the e-courts. As you know that the e-courts is basically to try to integrate, the electronically the courts across the country. So Dr. Justice Dhananjay Y. Chandrachud, who is basically the judge of Supreme Court of India, right, as well as who is also the chairperson of E-Committee of the Supreme Court, inaugurated a judgment and the orders portal, as well as he has also inaugurated the e-filing 3.0 module. So first of all, we will understand what is this judgments and the order protocols, and what is this e-filing 3.0 module. So first of all, you must understand the judgment and the orders portal. It is nothing but a portal, right, which will be having the repository. Repository means it will be having the collection of the judgments which are already pronounced by the high courts, various high courts. Okay, so the judgment and the order search portal, or portal simple, will have the already pronounced the judgments of the high courts. Okay, now it is the facility, or it is the portal where you can go, you can search the judgment, the final orders, right, and that will provide you much clearer picture related to those judgments. Second is e-filing 3.0 module. Now, in order to make the procedure of filing the case electronically much easier, e-filing 3.0 module was also inaugurated. Now, it is introduced by E-Committee of the Supreme Court, where Dr. Chandrachud is also the chairperson, allow the electronic filing of the court documents, where You can electronically file those documents, right? With the introduction of this e-filing 3.0 module, right? Obviously, there is no need for the lawyers or the clients to visit to the court premises for filing a case. You can file it electronically. Okay. And obviously, this type of filing of these cases electronically, as well as providing the platform for various judgments, that will definitely play a crucial role for ensuring the citizen-centric justice. Okay, and that will also recognize, the exemplary work which is being carried out, right, for making this project successful, right? And this project have been already been conferred as excellence in the digital governance award in 2020 by the government of India for its the crucial role it played for making it a citizen-centric justice, right? And it has been recognized as a most important exemplary work which have been carried out by this committee. Okay. Next, the Saroja or Saroja cyclone. Now you must understand it is a cyclone, right? Now the tropical cyclone, which is named as Saroja, have affected the Indonesia, right, East Timor as well as Western Australia. So it has covered around 1,000 kilometers stretch, right, and which has left a trail of damage across these three countries. Okay, now this severe tropical cyclone, which is also named as Saroja, is a deadly tropical cyclone. Tropical cyclone means it is being found in the tropics, right? And it is considered as a deadly tropical cyclone. It is comes under the category of severe cyclone. Okay. Now, this cyclone have brought the flooding and the landslides in specifically in the southern Indonesia, East Timor, as well as later it also impacted the Australia's Midwest region or Western Australia. Okay, and this is one of the deadliest, one of the severe cyclone, right? Since the cyclone Eleni, which was held or which was happened in 1999. Okay, now let's understand a brief about the Indonesia. Now, as you know that Indonesia is a country which is officially also known as the Republic of Indonesia. Okay, it is a country in the Southeast Asia as well as in the Oceania. It is basically found between Indian Ocean as well as the Pacific Ocean. Okay, and Indonesia currently consisting of more than 17,000 islands. 17,000 islands, right? It include the major islands like Sumatra, Java, Sulawesi, right? As well as it has also the part of Borneo and the New Guinea islands. All right. Let's understand about the East Timor. The East Timor is also known as the Timor-Leste, right? Which is nothing but the Southeast Asian nation, right? It is a Southeastern nation, which is occupying the half of the island of Timor. Okay, this is nothing but a coral reef teeming with lot of marine life. All right, and it basically have the struggle for the independence from the Portugal in 1975, as well as then Indonesia in 2002, right? Later it become an independent country. Okay, regarding Australia, you know that it is also known as the Commonwealth of Australia. Okay, it is a sovereign country which is currently comprises of the mainland of Australia continent, sorry, right? It has also consisting of the island of Tasmania and numerous smaller islands also. If you consider in terms of its size, it is the largest country in the Oceania. Okay, and it is the world sixth largest country, right? If you consider it by the total area, it is the world's sixth largest country by area. All right, so that's all for the three different countries. All right, the name Saroja for this severe tropical cyclones means in the Indonesian language is a lotus. Okay, and in 12th April 2021, right, it has estimated that around 224 people have killed because of this tropical cyclone Saroja. 181 people killed in Indonesia, 42 people killed in East Timor, right, and one killed in the Australia, right, which caused the havoc and the flooding, right, and the severe winds specifically in these three countries. So you can see it is basically the footprint of the cyclone Saroja, which have moved across these three countries. All right, next, the India Energy Dashboard, which is also known as IED. So India Energy Dashboard is nothing but a version 2.0, which is recently been launched by the NITI Aayog. Okay, now what is the purpose of India Energy Dashboard? It's the main purpose of creation of this version 2.2.0 is to provide the single window access to the energy data, right, to the users of the country. Now, this energy data will be published, or it will be provided by Central Electricity Authority, the as well as the Ministry of Petroleum Natural Gas, which is compiling this, the dashboards. The Niti Aayog have already launched this version 1.0 in May 2017. Okay, the main feature of this, the advanced version or enhanced version of India Energy Dashboard 2.2.0 is that, first of all, it will provide you the time series data. Time series data means you will have the data from 2005-6 financial year to 2019-20 financial year. So it will have around 20 years of the time series data. Okay, then it will also provide the enhancement of the data download. That means you can easily download the data. Okay, you can download the data in the convenient spreadsheet formats, right? You can collect the data in a more intuitive way, in a more cleaner and intuitive way. Okay, and this, the India Energy Dashboard, which is also known as the IED, also provide the sub-yearly frequencies as well, right? That means it will provide you the monthly data, right? It will also provide you the API linked data from some portals, which are obviously maintained by the government agencies. I'll come to that API a bit later. What is this API linked data, right? But it will definitely provide the sub-yearly frequencies. That means it will provide you monthly data as well as the API linked data. I'll come to that API a bit later. Okay. And the monthly data, obviously, which is basically provided by this India Energy Dashboard, right, would be sourced from the monthly reports. These monthly reports are basically published by, various sectors or various agencies. For example, in the agencies specifically working in the electricity, petroleum, or natural gas, these data will be taken from these agencies and ultimately will be published by the India Energy Dashboards, right? And this API linked data would also be taken from the Saubhagya, from Ujala, from Prati, from Vidyut Prabha, right? And from these, it will be also be incorporated in the portal also. Fine. Now let's understand, first of all, what is this, this I was talking about the API. What is this API? So API is nothing but the application programming interface. It is nothing but application programming interface. What is that? The API is simply an acronym for application programming interface, which you can say that it is a software intermediary, right, that allow the two applications to talk to each other. What do you mean by two applications to talk to each other? For example, each time you use a certain app, for example, if you are using Facebook, right, you send an instant message on the Facebook, right? And you can check it whether on your phone you are using this API also, right? So instantly sending these messages through the Facebook or checking out some of your phones, right, which is you are checking the weather condition of the phone, is something like which is also the API or application programming interface. If you put simply this concept called application program interface, you can say that it is a linked data. It is a linked data that will provide a common blueprint to allow us to share the data, right? So that we can share this data from multiple applications and multiple vendors over the web, right? Then that will be provided via, some sort of an agreed or common, the non-proprietary mechanism, right? Through that mechanism, you will be sharing this data, and any site, whether it is a government site or, any agency site, which is implementing a linked data, which is nothing but the application programming interface, right, would allow the sharing of this data in a same way as other sites, provide that one, and that will be implemented to that particular specification. All right. So it will be the India Energy Dashboard will provide the data related to the energy. Okay. Next, you have the Sushil Chandra. See, Sushil Chandra have already been appointed as the Chief Election Commissioner, right? Now the outgoing, Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. Sunil Arora, have already demitted the office on the 12th April. Okay. And from 13th April, the new Chief Election Commissioner, Sushil Arora, right, would take over as a Chief Election Commissioner, right, with the Election Commission of India. And President have already appointed the Sushil Chandra as a Chief Election Commissioner. Now, the Chief Election Commissioner, the new Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. Sushil Arora, would take over the charge of Chief Election Commissioner from 13th April 2021. Okay, and regarding Election Commission of India, as you know that Election Commission of India is a constitutional body. Constitutional body means it has created by the constitution, so it's a permanent constitutional body, first of all. Now it is, first of all, initially, originally the commission have only one chief election commission. That means it is a single member commission. It was a single member commission initially, but it was subsequently, its membership everything increased. Now currently it consists of one chief election commissioner plus 2 election commissioners, right? So that means it has currently 3-member body. It has currently the 3-member body, which is consisting of one chief election commissioner plus 2 election commissioners. Okay, regarding appointment, so first of all, you must understand the president has power to appoint the election commissioners as well as the chief election commissioner. So president appoint them under article 324 clause 2 of the constitution, right? So the president shall fix the number of election commissioners, right, as he sees fit. So president has the power to fix the election commissioners, the number of election commissioners, and which is obviously subjected to the provisions which is law made by the parliament. Now under article 324(2), it is left over to the parliament to legislate on this issue, right? And you must understand that if there is any absence related to the parliamentary law which govern this appointment process, right, these ECs are appointed by the government of the day without having any consultation process. So first of all, there is no concept called collegium like you have the judges of Supreme Court, right? There is no concept of the collegium, right? And there is no involvement of the opposition. They are directly appointed, right, with the help of or appointed by the government of the day. Obviously appointment is done by the president of this country, but there is absolutely no involvement of the opposition specifically for the appointment of Election Commission of India. Regarding their tenure, so they will be having the tenure of 6 years, right, or up to the age of 65 years. That means whichever is earlier, they will retire. So they will have normal tenures of 6 years, but if this 6 year is much larger than its age of the person, which is 65 years, which is the maximum age the person can hold the office, the person will retire at the age of 65 years. So whichever is earlier. Okay, and the chief election commissioner can be removed only through the process called impeachment, right? But the other election commissioners can be removed just by the recommendation of election commissioner. So that is something, the removal process related to the chief election commissioner as well as the election commissioners cause so much disappointment among some people, because the election commissioners in terms of removal process is not equated equally with the chief election commissioner, because the election commissioners can be removed just by recommendation of the chief election commissioner, but the chief election commissioner cannot be removed from his office without the impeachment. That too the parliament can do that, right, in the same manner in which the judge of the Supreme Court can be removed. So you can understand there is the different procedure for the removal of the chief election commissioner as well as the election commissioners, right, from the office of the Election Commission of India. All right, so he will be the Sunil, the Sushil Chandra, who will be, our new chief election commissioner, Sushil Chandra, Mr. Sushil Chandra, right? Next, you have the National Institute of Health. Now, first of all, you must understand it is a new institute which is going to be set up in Nagpur in Maharashtra. So that is called National Institute of Health. Okay, before that, Indian Council of Medical Research, the international symposium, which is being titled One Health in India, is basically held. And Dr. Harshvardhan, who is basically our Honorable Union Minister for the Health and the Family Welfare, have chaired this international symposium, which is named at the One Health in India. Now, it is basically, this symposium is mainly focusing on the research which is related to the biosafety, preparedness and response. Okay, and Dr. Harshvardhan has launched the special issue of the Indian Council of Medical Research, the Indian Journal of Medical Research, which is basically discussing the One Health approach. What is this One Health approach? First of all, you must understand it is nothing but the collaboration among the multi-sectoral research regarding the biosafety, regarding preparedness, right, regarding the response, right, specifically related to some sort of a viewpoints, perspectives, right, specifically among the eminent experts in the field, specifically in the field of medicine. All right. And as you know that Indian Council of Medical Research, which is located in Delhi, is the apex body, right, in India for the formulation, for coordination, as well as for the promotion of biomedical research, right. It is one of the oldest medical research bodies in the world, and the commencement of the constitution of this high level steering committee for eco health initiative in India was also announced. This high level, the steering committee would have the secretariat hosted at Indian Council of Medical Research, and that will be supported by the upcoming the National Institute of One Health that is going to be set up and going to be planned at the Nagpur in Maharashtra. Okay, so this One Health is something which is having the motto of the coordinating, communicating, and collaborating among the different stakeholders, right? So the people who can protect the human, animal, and environment health, as well as to achieve the best health outcomes for the people, for animals, for plants, for environment, for the ecosystem. All right. Next, you have the DGFT Trade Facilitation Mobile App. So first of all, the DGFT. What is DGFT? DGFT is nothing but a Director General of Foreign Trade. The Director General of Foreign Trade. See, Director General of Foreign Trade is a government organization in India. Okay, and it is responsible for the formulation of the EXIM guidelines. EXIM means export import guidelines. Okay, and the principles for Indian importers as well as the Indian exporters of the country. Okay, and the Union Commerce and Industry Ministers have launched the mobile app, which is nothing but the trade facilitation mobile app. The main purpose of this mobile app for the promotion of ease of doing business, right, as well as to provide the quick access to the information to the importers and the exporters of the country. Okay, and this mobile app, which is known as the DGFT Trade Facilitation Mobile App, is being developed by the Tata Consultancy Services, right? It has been developed by the TCS as per the directions of the Director General of the Foreign Trade, which is a government of India's agency or organization responsible for the formulation of export-import guidelines, right, as well as the principle of for the Indian importers as well as the exporters of the country. Okay, this trade facilitation app is nothing but ready for the industry 4.0 version, right? What it will provide the real-time trade policy update, okay, which is being facilitated by the government of India. All sort of a notifications, application status, any sort of an alert, right, which you can track your request, right? And it will also having the provision of exploring the item wise export import policy, okay, the stats, as well as to track this IEC portfolios, right? It is artificial intelligence based 24/7 assistance for the trade queries. Okay, and this Director General of the Foreign Trade would provide the services that will be accessible to all people. Okay, and that will provide a trade dashboard which is accessible anytime and from anywhere in the world. So that will be facilitating, right, the trade across the world. Okay, so you can see here it will have the importer exporter dashboard. It is the artificial intelligence based virtual assistance. It will have the digital submission using Aadhaar OTP. It will having the e-assurance of the certificates. It will have the QR scan to validate documents. It will have also the two-way communication channel. It will have the interdepartmental data exchange. It will have the facility of enhanced centralized bill repository. It will also the IEC in less than 30 minutes. You can do that. It will also having the duty exemption schemes complete life cycle. Okay, you will have the quality complaints and the trade dispute management. You can have the import monitoring system. You can have the secure transfer of duty credit scripts, and you will also have the e-policy relaxation request also. So that will be facilitating through this. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you very much. We will meet tomorrow for our next current affairs. Thank you.